Hello guys! In this course, you will learn how to turn your illustration into an animation. We'll be using Adobe Illustrator and Adobe After Effects, but also we'll be using Adobe Premiere Pro. You will learn some of the basic tools that will help you during this process, and also how to create multiple scenes and merge them together. So without further ado, let's begin with our course. after we're finished with creating an illustration, we have to prepare for the next step, and that is to import this illustration into After Effects. So before we import this illustration into After Effects, we need to separate parts that we're going to animate from the parts that will stay the same. So for the starters, I want to animate this light. So I'm going to drag this light onto a separate layer. So you go to a layers window, and as you can see, everything is on one layer. So click on this, create a new layer, and let's name it light. So if you want to rename a layer, just double click on this layer and type in a name that you want. So now, when we create the layer, let's drag this part onto a layer. So click on this illustration, and you'll see this blue rectangle. So that means that this illustration is right over here. So let's drag it onto a layer. And just release it. Now we have this on a separate layer. Next, I want to animate this hand over here. But before we do that, I need to arrange it so that after we go on to After Effects, we'll have the smooth workflow. So let's group everything that we want on a separate layer. So if you want to select multiple illustrations, just hold Shift and click on left click on your mouse. So let's do that. First, sleeve and our hand and fingers. And then, when we selected everything that we want, click on Group. Now, we'll see a group layer over here. Now let's create another layer and name it Hand. And then drag this group onto a layer. Next, let's change the position of our hand, so later on we can animate it. Let's place it right over here. Maybe rotate it a bit. And there it is. Now, when you're finished with arranging and separating on different layers, we can move on to After Effects. After you have opened Adobe After Effects, you'll be greeted with this starting page. On the left side, we have a project menu or panel, and down here we have timeline. What you have to do is drag IE file right over here, so we'll do that now. And after you do that, make sure that this import kind is on composition and that merge layer is selected, and click OK. Now drag it over here and double click. Now, as you can see, we have our layers right over here. So the next step we're going to cover is animation. So let's first animate this light. So as you can see here, we have a light layer. Then click on this arrow and again on transform. And here we have many options such as anchor point, scale, opacity. For this specific layer, we're going to use opacity. So click on this stopwatch and it automatically created a keyframe. So the next step is animation of this light. I will lower the size of our timeline so I can create animation on a much shorter period of time. So I'll move this indicator to about 5F, and again click create a keyframe. So I want to create an effect that this light is not working properly. So I'll downsize opacity to 0. So we created this simple effect. Now I'll add another keyframe right over here again, and again lower it, and again raise it to 100%. So let's see what we created. So yeah, again move for another F and create a keyframe and lower it to 0. So now it disappeared. So let's see what we have created. Okay, now that you're pleased with what you created, you can copy these keyframes by selecting them and copy, and then move this indicator, for example, right here, and click Ctrl+D. Now you pasted the exact same keyframes that we had over here. If you're not pleased with how this works, you can also move keyframes by dragging them. I'll move this, for example, here. And I think that we created this light effect. Again, you can copy these keyframes and paste it how much you want. I think that we'll add another second right over here. And we can move to another step. So after we finished with creating a light animation, we can close this layer by clicking on this arrow. And then we can move on to a hand layer. Again, click on arrow and transform arrow. So for this specific layer, I want this hand to go above the button and then down, so it is pressing a button. So I will use a rotation effect. So again, click on stopwatch and it automatically created a keyframe. So I'll go to, for example, 1 second and again click add keyframe. So from this moment, we're going to animate this hand. So let's move it to 2 seconds and add another keyframe. And let's first set an anchor point that is going to be used for rotation. So double click on arm and drag this anchor point, for example, right over here. You can close this layer. Just a second. Okay. So the next step is adding a rotation. So I'll type here -10. So let's see what we created. So it's slowly raising a hand. Now let's move to a third second and add another keyframe and type minus, for example, 3. Perfect. So let's see what we have created. So now, next step is creating a second part of our animation. And that is adding a black layer and eyes. So we can go back to Adobe Illustrator and create those two layers. So now, when we came back to Adobe Illustrator, let's add another layer, drag it on the bottom and type background. And let's add a black rectangle. Properties and fill black. So as you can see, we cannot see it in this moment, but if you toggle vision of our layer, you will see it. And next, let's add eyes. So I'll use ellipse tool to create small eyes, white background, multiply it, and I'll add another layer for an inner eye. So I'll add another smaller circle, color it in, for example, blue color, and copy it right over here. Place it so they're symmetric. So why we did this is later on we'll go into animate these two blue circles. You'll see why we did this. So I'll name it eyes So now I'll save it. And let's move on to Adobe After Effects. So as you can see, we have our layers in Adobe After Effects. So let's continue with our animation. So now our hand clicked a button. So the next step is to add a dark background layer. Again, click on this arrow, transform, and opacity. It's set to the keyframe. Now drag this layer on the top. Add opacity 0. Opacity stays the same, but move for 1F and add opacity keyframe again and type 0. So now, when the button is clicked, we have a black layer. Next step is to add eyes. Again, move these two layers on the top, right over here, above background. So they appeared. So I want eyes to appear not right away when the button is clicked. So let's move this indicator, for example, here, and add opacity on the both layers and type 0. Move indicator for 1F and again add keyframes and raise it to 100% on both layers. So now I have black and now eyes appeared. So I want So what I want next is to animate these two blue circles. Let's zoom in a bit. So let's move this indicator, for example, here. And let's use a position effect. So let's move a bit more here. And again, add this position. And our keyframe is selected. We're not doing the same for eyes layer, just for these two blue circles. So now we have a current position. So if we move to 4 seconds and again add position layer, and let's test when we lower this number for position. So now let's see what we have created. So yeah, we animated these two blue circles to slowly go from the right side to the left side. Now I want these two blue circles to go back to the right side. We will move this indicator here and again add a keyframe for the position. And let's lower this number or raise it. So let's see our current animation. We can zoom out on our timeline. So the next step is to again remove a black background. For example, here, let's close these two layers and let's add a keyframe for opacity for 100%. So till this moment, it will be black. So if we move on 1F here and again add a keyframe and type 0, it turns to opacity 0. We forgot to turn opacity of these two layers to 0, so we will do the same here. So till this moment they are here, so let's add keyframes on both of these layers to 100% and move 1F and again add keyframes and lower to 0% in both layers, and we removed our eyes. So now we're back to our illustration. So the next step is to repeat the same process. So this hand will go above, lamp will still not work, and then let's lower that hand again, clicking a button, and again repeat the process. And for the final part of this animation, we'll go back to Adobe Illustrator and create a final scene. You'll see later what I have on my mind. So from this moment, let's close these 3 layers and let's stick to light and hand layer. So now our hand is in this position. Let's add a keyframe and let's move to, for example, here and add another keyframe. And let's say -10 again and move to 8 seconds. And again, add a keyframe and -3. So we have the same position as over here. So the next step is to copy the light layer on this section over here. So from this moment, let's go to a light But first, let's copy these keyframes and paste them over here. So again, we came to the first scene. Again, let's repeat a process of a black background and eyes. Let's close these two layers and open background eyes and eyes amp. Add opacity keyframe on all these three layers to 0. Move another F and again add opacity keyframes. Raise them to 100%. Let's copy this position keyframes to over here. Let's move them a bit to over here, for example. Let's move these keyframes to around here. Let's add opacity again to 0. So let's see what we have currently made. So yeah, now we finished again. So now comes the final part, but before we do that, let's go into Adobe Illustrator and create a final scene. Save this current animation and go back to Adobe Illustrator. Click on Ctrl+C and it will automatically save your. So now I'll copy this illustration on a separate file, and on this copy, I'll delete black background and eyes. So we are left out with these parts of our illustration. So what I want now is to move this lamp, for example, here, so that it has fallen. And we're going to create a cat right over here and animate that cat. So let's do that. So you select a lamp and move it, for example, here and rotate it. I think that this is good. Now let's add a cat illustration. To be honest, I'm not a very good cat illustrator, but I'll try my best to create a cat. So let's start. First, I'm going to add a body. Now let's add a neck and legs. So let's say that this is a cat. I know it looks so terrible, but it can also be a chicken, whatever you desire. but that's not the point of this course. So the point is to learn how to use Adobe After Effects and Adobe Illustrator and to understand workflow. So let's move on to Adobe After Effects. But before we do that, let's move this tail onto a separate layer. So again, go to the layers window and add another layer and type tail. Select a tail, go to our layer and drag tail to a tail layer. Now we can go back to our Adobe After Effects and continue with animation. So now we came back to Adobe After Effects, and here we have a cat and a tail layer. So let's return to the beginning and see how this looks. We have a bit of a problem. So cat appeared over here. So let's add opacity layer and 0. And again, here 0. Eyes, and let's see where. Okay, so this is the ending. So now let's close this layer again and go to background layer, and again click opacity 100%, move 1F, and again click opacity and 0%. Repeat for the eyes and M. Here 0 and 0. Return 1F here, and again click opacity 100%. So we left out this part. Okay, so now let's introduce our cat. So I have decided to move on to a separate sequence and finish our animation, and then we can connect these two parts into a one by using, for example, Adobe Premiere Pro. I will again show you that final part in this course also. But for now, let's continue with our animation on the separate sequence. So what we have to do to finish off this animation is animate a cat tail. So, and again, also animate a light layer, but we do not have to repeat the same process. We can go back to our first animation and copy those keyframes. So let's do that first. So let's find a light layer that is going to be here and copy these keyframes, Control C, go to a light, transform, and opacity layer, and Control C. We already copied, so Control V. Let's zoom in to see. Yeah, so we have copied. Again, we have this light animation on this second sequence. So let's close this light part and go to a tail layer. Again, click this arrow and transform arrow. So we want also a rotation. Again, click on this rotation stopwatch and add a keyframe. So we have this keyframe on 0. Then move on to 1 second, let's say, and add another keyframe. And let's add, for example, 10. Let's move this keyframe here. Again, add another one, add 20. Double click on tail and move this anchor point here. Close this layer and let's see what we, okay, move back tail. Great. So now copy this keyframe, move here, paste it. You can speed it up or you can lower the time. Let's speed it up. Here, 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 and I'll copy the next step. Control C, Control V. I think it is too fast, so let's adjust it. For example, here, here, delete these 3 keyframes and copy these 2 here and here and 1 more here, and I think that it is enough. I think that the best solution is to copy these 3 keyframes and then paste them. So I'll do that. Move here, paste, paste, and let's see our final product. This looks more like a dog, but this is a discussion for another topic. Now let's see how you can export these animations. So let's go back to our previous first sequence. So what you have to do when you finished with animating, let's first check if everything is okay. Click fit. So yeah, everything is as it should. So let's see till what time our first sequence is long. So till 9.24. So after you have checked everything, you go to composition and pre-render. Click on pre-render. Save your file. I'll save it as animation final. Now you have, I don't know why it's so scooched right here. So output 2, you can click on it and change output. Output module, again, you can change it also. I'll change it to AVI, so it is the best format to save your animation. Remember that this format will take a lot of your storage capacity, but you can in any time transfer it to MP3 in, for example, Adobe Premiere Pro. So select AVI and add best settings. So if you remember, this part lasts 9.24 seconds, so click custom and add end to 9.24. Okay, click again OK and click render. Repeat the same process for the second sequence, and then we can move on to Adobe Premiere Pro workflow. So now, after you have opened Adobe Premiere Pro, you can drag these two parts into a project file, project menu over here. And then after you drag them over here, you can drag them on this timeline. So first comes the first part and then the second part. So now this is a video timeline, this is audio timeline. So I'll introduce you to some basic tools in Adobe Premiere Pro. So this is a razor tool, and it helps you to cut a certain video into how much you want pieces. Selection tool is used for moving these videos around. Ripple edit tool helps you remove a certain part, and it automatically drags a part that is on the right side to the left side. So it helps you in connecting two videos. So now let's finish our animation and see the final product. So let's play it. Now connect these two videos and let's see our final product. Also, I'm going to add sound effects, but I'll not be showing you those steps in this course, but you'll see them in the final animation that I'm going to present you right now.